In the summer of 1982, a 9-year-old boy vanished from a textile factory his uncle managed in New Jersey. No witnesses, no evidence, just an open delivery door and silence. But in 2024, during demolition of the long-abandoned building, a sealed furnace room was uncovered. Inside were ashes, melted plastic, a mattress, and the boy's school ID, perfectly preserved. What happened in that factory was never in the reports. Until now. Don't forget to subscribe for more cinematic, true crime thrillers based on real investigative psychology, long-buried secrets, and chilling discoveries. October 22nd, 2024. Location: Newark, New Jersey. The old emblem textile plant demolition supervisor Henry Dorsey thought the site was clear. The permits had passed. The asbestos had been stripped. The structure had been gutted. All that remained of the emblem textile plant, shut down since 1989, was its concrete bones. But then, beneath the cracked tile near the boiler, one of his crew found a hollow sound. A metal grate, welded shut. Behind it, an iron furnace door. When they finally cracked it open, the smell hit first. What lay inside would unravel one of the oldest cold cases in New Jersey history. October 22nd, 2024. Location: Newark, New Jersey. Former emblem textile plant. The grinder had just started its first pass when the smell hit. Acrid, burnt. Not like wood or old grease. Something worse. Something biological. Henry Dorsey lifted his hard hat and sniffed the air, frowning. "Kill the blade," he yelled, waving his arm as sparks sprayed from the cutting saw beneath the west boiler unit. The machine ground to a stop with a stuttering whine, and the silence that followed felt unnatural, like the building itself was holding its breath. "Jesus, what is that?" one of the crewmen muttered, stepping back from the furnace wall. Even through the dust masks, the smell curled in. Sickly sweet and chemical, like burned hair mixed with cleaning fluid and decay. Dorsey stepped forward cautiously, heavy boots crunching through plaster debris and rust flakes. He swept his flashlight beam along the cracked tile, then down toward the warped metal furnace panel, half buried under an old steel shelf. It was odd. Weld lines had sealed the furnace shut, sloppy but strong, like someone hadn't wanted it opened again. Ever. "Did we miss a panel on the blueprint?" he asked. "Not according to the city records," said Miguel, his assistant, flipping through the dusty permit binder. "This wall wasn't even marked for inspection. Probably grandfathered in." Dorsey knelt and tapped his knuckle against the furnace door. It rang hollow, then shifted slightly. Not empty. He stood slowly. "Get me bolt cutters, and bring Diaz over here, now." Within minutes, Diaz had cut through the rusted latch. The door shrieked as it creaked open, the hinges reluctant, the seal breaking with a hiss of stale air, and something darker. Dorsey stepped back. "Vent the room, now!" They pulled masks tighter and used crowbars to prop the door open. Flashlights spilled yellow beams across the furnace chamber. And then they saw it. A charred mattress. Twisted springs warped by heat. Melted plastic pooling beneath what might once have been a toy. And tucked into the corner, miraculously untouched by flame, a scorched school ID card, partially melted, but legible. Emblem Elementary Ethan Raines. Grade 4, Room 3. A date, 1982. Dorsey exhaled slowly. "Get the cops." 12 blocks away, Detective Callie Mercer was finishing the last sip of her gas station coffee when her department phone lit up. "Yeah?" she said, already gathering her notepad. "You're gonna want to see this," said Sergeant O'Malley on the other end. "Old textile plant. Demolition crew just uncovered a sealed furnace, burned mattress, some kind of school ID from the 80s. "Burned?" Mercer asked, frowning. "Looks deliberate. We're holding the site. You in?" "I'm on my way." She clicked off the call and stared at the ceiling of her unmarked car for a long second before tossing the cup into the back seat. She'd been assigned to cold case for just over 2 years, but very little ever got warm. Most days were paperwork and dead ends. Until now. Emblem Textile Plant. 45 minutes later, the building looked like every other decaying industrial site in Newark. Graffiti tags, broken windows, vines crawling over collapsed roofs, and a decades-old silence pressing in like fog. Mercer ducked under the yellow tape and nodded to O'Malley, who stood near a stack of temporary lights. "Smell it yet?" he asked. She nodded, eyes watering slightly, like something crawled into a radiator and died. He gestured to the open furnace door, now surrounded by mobile lights and a forensic team in Tyvek suits. "We found this inside." He handed her a clear evidence bag. Inside, the school ID. Melted on the corners, warped but still bearing a face. A boy. Big ears, crooked smile, brown bowl cut. The kind of photo you'd take in front of a blue paper backdrop at elementary school. Innocent, frozen. "Ethan Raines," she read. "Never heard of him," O'Malley admitted. "But it's real. We ran the school district archive. They pulled an old yearbook scan from 1982. Ethan was enrolled. Went missing in July of that year." Mercer raised an eyebrow. "Wait, missing?" "Yup, never solved. Family moved out of state a year later. No leads, no body. And now we've got this," she said, peering into the furnace again. Something blackened, fused with the metal. A melted shoe sole, plastic bones from an action figure, and other shapes she couldn't quite name. She turned back toward the evidence table. "Any sign of human remains?" "Too early to tell, but forensics says whatever burned in there, it was intentional. They'll know more after the lab sweep." Mercer crouched by the open furnace, her eyes narrowing. The floor was concrete, but something about the way the tile ended felt wrong, like the furnace had been retrofitted in. "Get me blueprints," she said. "From 1982. The original plans, not the demo ones." Later that night, Mercer sat at her desk, staring at the faded microfiche scans of a Newark Tribune article from August 1982. 9-year-old boy disappears at local factory. Parents say Ethan Raines was visiting uncle at work, never seen again. No witnesses, no signs of struggle, just a wide-open dock door and a missing child. The article said police at the time suspected runaway or accidental fall into the nearby drainage canal. No foul play suspected. Case went cold by 1984. Mercer leaned back in her chair. They didn't even search the furnace wing. She clicked open the department cold case database. Case number 82, NK410. Ethan Raines, marked presumed lost. No updates in 38 years. Until now. Back at the factory, as the last of the crew loaded up and forensics packed their gear, one of the techs approached Mercer with something new. "Found this tucked behind the furnace panel," he said, holding up a rusted clipboard wrapped in plastic. "Looks like an old maintenance log." Mercer flipped through the pages. Routine entries, boiler temps, shift initials. Then, scribbled in a different ink on one page dated July 18th, 1982. "Door resealed. No access without key." Lou said not to log anything further. Mercer circled the name. "Lou," she whispered. She turned back to the photograph of Ethan Raines, the boy who never made it out of the factory. But someone made sure of that. June 14th, 1982. Flashback location, Emblem Textile Plant, Newark, New Jersey. Ethan Raines hated the smell of the factory. It clung to everything: his hair, his shirt, the seat of his uncle's old El Camino. A sour mix of hot cotton, burned oil, and bleach that made his throat dry and his eyes sting. But he never complained. Not once. Because for a 9-year-old boy who barely spoke above a whisper in school, The Emblem textile plant was a kingdom, and Uncle Lou made him feel like a prince. "Stay where I can see you, kiddo," Lou called over the roar of the weaving machines. Ethan nodded, his eyes wide as he ducked around a rusting column, careful not to trip over the thick cords that slithered across the cracked concrete floor. The factory floor stretched forever. Machines clattered in rhythmic stutters. Giant looms churned bolts of dyed cloth in dull reds and mustard yellows. Workers moved like ghosts in their aprons and safety goggles, barely glancing up. Most of them knew Ethan by name. He was Lou's nephew, the factory kid. Always polite, always watching. Some even brought him candy. Others pretended he wasn't there at all. Lou Raines, a thick-set man with a shaved head and a belt full of jangling keys, ran maintenance on the graveyard shift. He wasn't supposed to bring Ethan around during work hours, but Lou had long since stopped caring about policies, especially in a place slowly bleeding money and staff. "Place is gonna fold in a year," he muttered one night, flicking his cigarette out the loading bay door. "Might as well let you see how things work before it's all dust and broken lights." Ethan didn't answer. He was too busy staring up at the glowing red "Furnace Wing, Employees Only" sign that hung crooked above a heavy metal door at the far end of the corridor. It was the one door Lou had told him never to touch, and like all forbidden things, it fascinated him. The summer of 1982 was unusually hot. The factory windows barely opened, and ceiling fans turned slowly like dying birds. Every weekday at 7:30 a.m., Ethan would wait outside his uncle's apartment in a t-shirt and jeans, with his Superman lunchbox and worn sneakers. His mother, working doubles at the hospital, had little say in the arrangement. She trusted Lou. He was family, and Lou, for all his rough edges, never let Ethan out of his sight. Except on July 21st, the last day Ethan was ever seen. It started like any other morning. The machines had been shut down for servicing. Most of the floor crew was off. Lou had paperwork to file and boiler levels to check. "Go play upstairs," he told Ethan, handing him a cherry soda. "Just stay out of the furnace wing. You remember the rules." Ethan nodded. "Yes, sir." He wandered through the dusty storage floor, past pallets of thread and silent conveyor belts. The factory was a maze of forgotten rooms, some locked, others yawning open into darkness. He liked the quiet corners, the echo of his footsteps, the way the dust danced in the sunlight. Around 10 a.m., a worker named Clyde Braxley passed Ethan in the hallway. "You lost again, kid?" he asked, smiling with crooked teeth. "No, sir, just exploring." "You see your uncle?" Ethan shook his head. "He's downstairs." Clyde looked down the hall. "Be careful. Some places here weren't built for kids." No one saw Ethan after 10:15. At 10:27, the delivery entrance alarm briefly buzzed. The log sheet later said, "Door malfunction." By 11 o'clock, Lou was looking for him. By noon, police were called. By evening, the factory was sealed off. By the next week, search dogs had scoured every inch of the building and the woods beyond it. Nothing, not a footprint, not a sock, not a sound. Just a single word written in red chalk on the back wall of the stairwell where Ethan had last been spotted. Shh. Present day. October 24th, 2024 Cold Case Division, Newark PD Detective Callie Mercer stared at the faded photo of Ethan taped to the board in front of her. "He was here," she said quietly. "He never left." 42 years, said Sergeant O'Malley, leaning on the filing cabinet beside her. "That's longer than most buildings even stand. You think this Lou guy knew?" Mercer didn't answer right away. Instead, she picked up a photocopy of the plant's 1982 blueprints. "There's a sealed floor beneath the furnace chamber," she said. "No stairs, no ventilation, and no record of it being built." She pointed to a spot marked non-load-bearing wall. If that was hollow, they could have hidden anything behind it. O'Malley raised a brow. "And the ID? Planted, or missed during the burn. Either way, this wasn't an accident. Someone hid that room. Someone who had keys and time. She picked up a dusty employee list from 1982. Lou Raines was near the top. Clyde Braxley was fourth. That night, as the forensics team reviewed infrared scans of the furnace floor, they found something new. A heat signature. Subsurface. Roughly the size of a crawlspace hatch. "Get a crew in here with ground-penetrating radar," Mercer said, "and torch the welds." She didn't say it aloud, but she felt it in her bones. The fire was the cover. The furnace wasn't the crime scene. It was the lid. October 25th, 2024. Location: Emblem Textile Plant. Newark, New Jersey. The weld screeched as the metal screamed apart. Torch sparks lit up the gloom like fireflies as the final cut sliced through the thick steel panel beneath the boiler. Two forensics techs stepped back, sweat dripping down their necks, tools hissing in the cool autumn air. Detective Callie Mercer stood behind them, arms crossed, watching intently. "You ready?" one of the techs asked. "Do it," Mercer said. They pried the scorched slab loose. It groaned as it gave way, releasing a gust of foul, trapped air that reeked of rot, rust, and something older. Mercer took an involuntary step back, her stomach clenching. Flashlights cut the darkness. Behind the panel was a wall of brick and decaying insulation, and something else. A wooden door, half covered in black soot and foam insulation. No knob, just a recessed metal handle and 3 bolts across its width. Burn marks surrounded it, but the door itself was intact. And on the center, in faded, childlike lettering barely visible through the grime, a name had been scratched into the wood. "Ethan. You ever seen that before?" Mercer asked one of the retired Emblem workers brought in for questioning. John Resnick was 79, thin and bitter, living in a nursing home outside Trenton. His memory was patchy, but his eyes sharpened when Mercer showed him the photo of the furnace door. "That room," he muttered, tapping the photo. "They told us never to go in there. Said it was part of the old boiler runoff. Unsafe. Lou handled it." Mercer leaned in. "Lou Raines?" Resnick nodded. "Maintenance boss. Always walking around like he owned the place. He'd keep that hallway locked. We just stayed out of it." "Why?" Resnick hesitated. "Because once, in July '82, I heard a kid crying, real quiet, like someone trying not to be heard. I asked Lou about it. He laughed, told me it was just the pipes." "And you believed him?" "No," Resnick admitted. "But you don't poke around in a dying plant with 2 months severance left." Later that evening, the ground-penetrating radar crew confirmed what Mercer had suspected. Beneath the sealed boiler room was a hollow cavity, roughly the size of a studio apartment. 6 feet down, concrete sides, no foundation connection. A bunker. They worked through the night. By dawn, they jackhammered through the floor. A ladder was lowered in. Mercer was the first one down. The smell intensified the deeper she went. Her flashlight beam sliced through the darkness, illuminating pink insulation curled like dead skin along the walls. The air was heavy. Still. Then her foot hit soft ground, packed dirt, not concrete. She scanned the room. What she saw stopped her breath. There was a mattress on the far side of the chamber, child-sized, its faded dinosaur sheets yellowed with age and mildew. Beside it, a rusted metal tray. Old candy wrappers, a plastic juice cup, a broken red action figure, all laid out as if for display. A child's living quarters, underground, forgotten. And there, against the back wall, a small wooden chair, chains bolted to the floor beside it. Mercer's throat closed. She turned away, swallowing bile. There was no doubt now. Ethan Raines had been kept here. Police headquarters. 3 hours later, the entire cold case division now operated in crisis mode. The discovery had turned Ethan's disappearance from a presumed accidental death into a criminal abduction and possible homicide, 42 years too late. "Get me every surviving employee who worked in that building in 1982, Mercer told her team. "Anyone who had keys, anyone connected to maintenance, and I want Lou Raines located immediately." An officer approached her desk. "We've got a potential address. Lou moved to West Virginia in the late 80s, small town called Finch Hollow. No phone, but DMV says he's alive." "Good. Get someone out there. And, detective?" the officer added. "What?" "There's someone here to see you. Says she knew Ethan, back then. Interview room 2, 10:42 a.m. The woman sat with her hands clasped in her lap. Early 50s. Hair pulled tight. Nervous. Mercer entered. "Thanks for coming. You said you knew Ethan Raines." "I was in his class," she said. "Emblem Elementary, room 3. "Hey, my name's Sarah Levy now, but I was Sarah Bloom then." Mercer sat across from her. "What do you remember?" Sarah glanced at the photo on the wall. Ethan's 4th grade school portrait, now reprinted and pinned beside the crime scene images. "I remember. He was quiet, smart. He liked drawing dinosaurs. He was always covered in chalk dust." She paused. "He gave me a cassette tape the week before he disappeared." Mercer blinked. "You still have it?" Sarah nodded and slid a plastic sandwich bag onto the table. Inside, a cracked cassette with fading blue ink. Just one word written in a child's handwriting. "For you." Back at Mercer's desk, they found an old cassette player in evidence. She inserted the tape, fingers trembling. Static. Then a faint voice. "Testing. This is Ethan Raines. I'm 9. I'm not supposed to talk in here, but I get lonely. Uncle Lou says if I'm good, I get to go home in August. But I don't think he means it. The man in the apron comes when Lou leaves. He smells like paint thinner. He has gloves. I don't like the princess game." The tape went silent. Then a creaking sound. And a man's voice. "Time to go downstairs again, little guy. Don't forget our secret." The recording clicked off. Mercer sat frozen. She looked up at her team. Find Lou Raines and find out who else had keys to that building. October 26th, 2024. Location, Newark Forensics Lab. Evidence Unit 4. The remains from the furnace room arrived in labeled bags. Sealed, scorched, charred cloth fibers, fused wiring, a partially melted mattress spring. Beneath it all, blackened fragments that could have been wood, bone, or both. Forensics lead Dr. Jaime Keene stood under the sterile light of the exam table, her face unreadable beneath her surgical mask. Mercer stood beside her, gloved and silent, watching the layout unfold. "You sure you want to see this in person?" Keene asked. "Not all detectives do." "I want to see everything," Mercer said, "especially what they tried to hide." The table was filled with ash and questions. Keene began pointing as she talked. "This here, thermal deformation on the steel spring coil, tells me this mattress burned hotter than a standard house fire. See that bubbling in the foam residue? That's synthetic polymer breakdown, likely accelerated by accelerant exposure." "Gasoline." Keene shook her head. "Number more likely paint thinner or denatured alcohol. Something flammable, but clean burning. Common in industrial settings." Mercer leaned closer. "What about the timeline? Could this burn have occurred in 82 and not been discovered?" "Unlikely," Keene said, flipping through a printed breakdown. "If the room was sealed immediately after, oxygen deprivation would have limited the burn. But this wasn't spontaneous combustion. It was staged, purposefully set, then locked and welded shut. Which means someone wanted it to look abandoned, just not forensically clean." Keene picked up a tiny fragment in tweezers. "And this is why it didn't work." She placed it into a plastic tray under the microscope. Mercer peered through the lens. It was a molten lens frame. Bent, half-burned plastic. But the shape was unmistakable. a child's eyeglasses. Prescription, Keene confirmed. The kind issued through Emblem Elementary's voucher program back in the early 80s. Ethan wore glasses, Mercer whispered. Later that afternoon, Mercer stood before the wall of evidence in the cold case room. Her index cards were lined up in careful rows. Names, dates, photos, floor plans. At the center, Ethan's face. She had two suspects. Lou Raines, maintenance supervisor, uncle to Ethan, full facility access. Moved to West Virginia in 1988. Disconnected phone. No record of employment after 1992. Clyde Braxley, boiler technician, multiple workplace complaints, quietly dismissed 3 weeks after Ethan disappeared. No forwarding address. Off the grid. She marked them both in red. 2 men with keys. 2 men with motive. 1 child who vanished. 1 room burned and sealed. She stared at the evidence log again. Something didn't add up. There was too much left behind. Ethan's glasses, the ID card, the tape, the wall name. Why burn the mattress but not destroy the ID? Why leave behind a room that, despite everything, still whispered his name? Unless the fire was never meant to erase Ethan, it was meant to erase someone else. Emblem Textile Plant. Backroom archives. Later that night. A city contractor contacted Mercer after uncovering a hidden records closet behind the former HR office. Dust choked the air, and entire shelves had collapsed from water damage. But some files survived. She spent hours scanning yellowed folders, clock-in logs, disciplinary slips. 1 file stood out. Braxley, Clyde R., employee number 2, 137. Mercer flipped through it. Hired, February 1981. Role, furnace technician. Last clock in, July 23, 1982. Terminated, August 10, 1982. No reason listed, just a typed sentence. Contract concluded. No return recommendation. She frowned. No return recommendation wasn't standard phrasing. She kept reading. There was a stapled note in handwriting, dated August 4th. After incident in furnace wing, Braxley placed on unpaid leave. Lou signed off on exit. Requested no formal inquiry. Advised HR to log as quiet removal. Below it, Lou Raines' signature. Next morning. October 27th. Finch Hollow, West Virginia. Population 612. Detective Mercer stepped out of the unmarked SUV and adjusted her blazer. The air smelled like chimney smoke and wet bark. A red tin mailbox beside the porch read, Lou Raines, number 32, Deer Hook Road. He lived in a single-story ranch house surrounded by overgrown shrubs and a rusting Ford pickup with flat tires. The porch creaked under her step. She knocked. No answer. She knocked again, harder. Eventually, the door cracked open. A man in his 70s squinted through the screen. Tall, thin, sagging skin and thinning hair. A long scar trailed down the side of his neck. He held a coffee mug that read, Number 1 Uncle. "Can I help you?" he said, voice hoarse. "Mr. Raines," Mercer said, holding up her badge. "I'm Detective Callie Mercer, Newark PD. I need to ask you some questions about the Emblem Textile Plant. Specifically about your nephew, Ethan." The name hit him like a thrown stone. He blinked slowly. "After all this time," he muttered. "Why now?" "Because we found the furnace room." Lou's eyes went distant. Mercer stepped closer. "And we found the bunker under it." October 27th, 2024. Location: Finch Hollow, West Virginia, home of Lou Raines. The silence after Mercer's words stretched long and taut. Lou Raines didn't move, didn't blink. He stood in the shadow of his own screen door, coffee mug trembling slightly in his hand. "We found where he was kept," Mercer said, voice level. "We found the mattress, the chains, the fire damage. You were the last known adult to see Ethan alive." Lou finally opened the screen door and stepped back. "Come in," he said. The house was dim and humid. The walls were yellowed with age, the carpet threadbare. A worn recliner faced an old tube TV tuned to static. A calendar hung askew on the kitchen wall. October 2009, frozen in time. Lou moved slowly, like his body was filled with sand. He sat heavily at the kitchen table and gestured for Mercer to do the same. "I thought I could forget," he said, voice gravel and regret. "I tried to forget." "You knew he was missing," Mercer said. "You knew they never found his body." "I didn't know where he ended up," Lou said. "Not really." Mercer sat still, not offering sympathy. "Then let's go back. July 1982. What happened?" Lou exhaled through his nose, eyes fixed on the table. "I was working the early shift. Ethan had been staying with me, just for the summer. My sister was doing doubles at the hospital. I figured it'd be good for him, show him how stuff worked. Get him out of the apartment. He was a quiet kid, smart. Too smart, maybe." Mercer said nothing. "He liked to wander," Lou continued. "There were parts of the plant that even I didn't go into much. The old boiler rooms, the storage wing. Back then, it was easy to get lost in that place. No cameras, no alarms." "Tell me about Clyde Braxley," Mercer said. Lou stiffened. His jaw tightened. "He wasn't right," Lou muttered. "Never was, but the bosses didn't care. Said he showed up on time, kept the furnaces running, and that was enough. But I saw the way he looked at the kids when workers brought them in for shift pickups. Too long, too fixed. One time, I caught him showing Ethan how to sneak through the duct system behind the furnace. Said it was a game. I told him to stay the hell away from my nephew." "But you didn't report him." Lou's mouth twisted. "No one listened back then. Not about that stuff." Mercer leaned forward. "Did Clyde hurt Ethan?" Lou didn't answer, just stared at the floor. "Did you help him hide it?" she asked. "No!" Lou snapped, slamming the table. "I would never—" He caught himself. His hands shook. "I found the room 2 days after Ethan disappeared. I had a master key. No one else was supposed to be in the furnace wing, but when I checked the lock, it was warm. And when I opened the panel behind the boiler—" He trailed off. "There was a mattress," he said finally. "Food wrappers, toys, and Ethan's jacket. Clyde was gone by then. Left his tools behind. Why didn't you call the police?" Lou looked up, eyes bloodshot. "I was afraid they'd think I helped him, that I knew, that I let it happen. I welded the room shut, burned the mattress to cover the smell. I didn't know he was still in there. I thought Clyde took him." Mercer stared at him, fury low and quiet in her throat. "You left that child in a sealed bunker, burned the evidence, and you didn't go back?" Lou's voice broke. "I didn't want to know the truth." Mercer stood. "You're going to come with me, and you're going to tell every bit of that to a recorder, under oath." Newark PD, October 29th, 2024 Evidence Recovery Unit, Sub-Level 3. 2 days later, during another sweep of the Emblem Building's lower archives, forensic technician Dana Lau stumbled across something unexpected: a collapsed shelf behind the payroll vault. Tucked beneath the debris was a green ledger book, brittle with age and water damage. The cover was marked with faint letters in black ink: attendance, maintenance, sub-level work. July, September 1982. Inside were hand-drawn charts, initials, boiler temperatures, and then a table labeled ER with 26 rows. Each row dated, beginning June 18th and ending July 21st. Beside every date, a red X. The last entry, July 21st, was circled. In the margin, someone had written, "No breakfast, no blanket today. Still cried." Mercer turned the page. At the bottom, a single phrase, underlined in thick ink: "If he talks, we all burn." October 30th, 2024. Location: Emblem Textile Plant, Furnace Wing, Sub-Level B. The floor cracked open like a wound. Beneath the scorched furnace slab, under decades of grime and concrete patchwork, a new void revealed itself. Forensics had traced heat anomalies to the farthest corner of the wing, beneath a wall that didn't exist on the original 1980s blueprint. They'd started with hand tools, chisels, and picks. But what lay behind the old concrete wasn't just a wall. It was a facade, a deliberately constructed false panel, wrapped in steel mesh and painted to blend into the boiler room's industrial piping. Detective Callie Mercer stood with arms folded as the wall came down. Each chunk of concrete exposed more lies. The men around her barely spoke. No one did in moments like this. They all understood the weight. Behind the false wall was another door. Steel. Seamless. No knob. No lock. Just a narrow indentation on the right, finger-worn and smudged. Mercer stepped forward. "Get the hinge cutter," she said. "We go now." It took nearly 40 minutes to breach it. The door fell inward with a low thud, revealing a space beyond it, swallowed in total blackness. The air that escaped was still, rank, like a sealed tomb. They flicked on portable lamps. Light swept across the chamber. Gasps broke from the forensics team. It was not the same bunker as before. This wasn't where Ethan had been kept. This was where they watched. The room was wider than the other, the size of a single-car garage. Every surface was covered in insulation foam, layered and stapled into the concrete walls. There were no windows. No ventilation. In the corner stood a tripod-mounted VHS camera, long dead but still aimed at a child-sized mattress on the floor. Next to the mattress, a pink plastic vanity, a box of crayons, half-melted dolls with missing eyes, a baby monitor. Mercer's light found the most chilling part, the walls. They were covered in taped-up photos, dozens, of a child in various outfits. Dresses, swimsuits, even pajamas with cartoon characters from the early 80s. In every photo, the child sat still, looking off camera, looking afraid. "Ethan." "Ma'am," one of the techs said, gently tugging Mercer's sleeve. "We found a storage cache." He pointed to a floor grate. It had been screwed into place with industrial bolts. When they pried it free, it revealed a chest-high crawl space lined with plastic storage bins and metal tape cases. Dozens of them, each one carefully labeled with masking tape. Princess Room Volume, 1-inch PR Volume 2, compliant. PR Volume 3, needs retake. Mercer swallowed hard. "Bag and catalog all of it," she said, "and have CSU isolate fingerprints from every bin." Another officer called from the back of the chamber. "Detective Mercer, you're going to want to see this." She followed his light to the rear wall where the insulation had sagged near the floor. Someone had carved into the concrete, sloppy but legible. "Ethan was here. Please find me." Below it, dozens of scratch marks, finger length, desperate. Mercer turned away, fists clenched. Newark PD, Evidence Lab. 6 hours later, the first tapes were loaded into a digitizer by a specialist team. Mercer insisted on being present. The contents would be reviewed first with filters and forensic protocols in place. No one wanted raw exposure to what was almost certainly child exploitation material. Still, even the audio tracks alone were damning. In the first reviewed tape, labeled Princess Room Volume 5, a child's voice could be heard. Mercer recognized it instantly. "Do I have to wear it again?" A male voice. "Yes, Ethan." Smile. "You want to be good, don't you?" Another recording showed only footage of the pink room. No child, just an adult male stepping into frame. The angle never showed his face fully, but what was visible was the logo on his shirt. EMBLEM Textile, Maintenance. October 31st, 2024. Press blackout. Issued. The discovery of the hidden chamber and tapes prompted the district attorney's office to issue a full media blackout until arrests could be made. But inside Mercer's team, the mood was shifting. The tapes suggested more than just Ethan. The camera angles, the volume labels. Some labeled with names they didn't recognize. Others listed only dates, some as recent as 1985. "Do we have a body?" the DA asked bluntly during an emergency briefing. "Not yet," Mercer said, "but we have the blueprint of a pattern. The tapes may not stop with Ethan. I think this was a ring, and Ethan may have been the first." Meanwhile, a cabin in rural Pennsylvania, registered to Clyde Braxley, 71, a local sheriff, acting on a tip from Newark PD, arrived at a rundown cabin 3 hours outside Pittsburgh. Overgrown, locked from the inside, with no utilities or mail service. Inside, beneath the floorboards, they found a steel box. Inside the box, 6 VHS tapes, a torn denim jacket, size child, small, a plastic toy badge with Ethan scratched into the back, and a letter. The letter was addressed to whoever finally comes looking. It was signed, Clyde Braxley, and the final line read, "Lou burned him, but he didn't kill him first. I did. I'm sorry. I kept the tapes to remind myself what I was. Don't forgive me. Don't let it happen again." November 1st, 2024. Location: Newark PD, Cold Case Division. Detective Callie Mercer stood over the evidence board, eyes fixed on the 2 faces now pinned at the top. Lou Raines, retired maintenance supervisor, confessed to sealing the bunker but denied knowledge of Ethan's death. Clyde Braxley vanished in 1982, now confirmed alive. Confession recovered. The confession letter from Clyde's cabin had been rushed by state troopers overnight. Written in barely legible script, its tone teetered between guilt and madness. Mercer reread the lines for the 10th time. "I didn't mean to kill him. I just wanted him quiet. He wouldn't stop crying. Lou said we'd lose everything if anyone found out, so I made it look like he ran away. But then I came back and he wasn't gone. He was in the room, still. So Lou burned it." She rubbed her temples. It wasn't just a cover-up. It was a plan. Later that morning, Evidence Review Room 2. Mercer sat with forensic analyst Dana Lau and Sergeant O'Malley, surrounded by boxes of cataloged VHS tapes, audio transfers, and still frames pulled from hours of Princess Room footage. "What do we know about the man behind the camera?" Mercer asked. "From audio signatures and reflections," Dana said. "We're confident most early tapes, volumes 1 through 10, feature Braxley's voice. The cadence matches an old interview from the 1970s. Same smoker's rasp, same phrasing. We also found a mirror reflection in volume 6. Partial match to his DMV photo from 1980. O'Malley slid a photo across the table. It was grainy, but clear enough. A man in a brown maintenance apron, partially obscured by light glare. No face, but the badge clipped to the apron read, "C. Braxley, Furnace Tech." Mercer exhaled. "That confirms him as the primary abuser. What about Lou?" Dana hesitated. "There are 3 tapes, volumes 11, 13, and 14, where the voice behind the camera changes. Deeper, softer. One time the speaker calls Ethan by a nickname, Spark Plug. That matches what Lou told us he called him when Ethan was little." O'Malley leaned forward. "So Lou participated?" "Maybe not in the assaults," Dana said. "But in the conditioning? Yes. He was in that room. He filmed. He gave commands." Mercer stared at the label on volume 13. Sparkplug cooperates. Big day. 2 hours later. Interview room 4. Lou Raines sat with his hands folded, face drawn and pale. He'd been read his rights and waived counsel, something Mercer found both suspicious and convenient. She placed a still image from the volume 13 on the table in front of him. Ethan, sitting on the mattress. Behind the lens, a figure in silhouette, hand outstretched. "You said you burned the mattress to cover up what Clyde did," Mercer said. "But this image was recorded weeks before Ethan's death. That's your voice, Lou." Lou didn't look at the photo. "I tried to stop it," he whispered. Mercer slammed her fist on the table. "You documented it. Tears welled in his eyes. He said he'd kill me too, that he had pictures, that he'd say it was my idea. I was already in too deep. I let him bring Ethan in there. I watched him go through that door, and I didn't stop him. And so you recorded your own nephew's abuse? I never touched him, Lou roared, then slumped. But I didn't protect him either. Mercer let the silence drag. I thought sealing the room was the only way to end it, he said. To bury it. But the tapes, he took them with him. He told me if I ever talked, he'd make sure I went down too. Mercer stood. You're going down anyway. November 2nd. DA's office, Essex County. The charges were filed before sunset. Clyde Braxley, first-degree murder, multiple counts of child sexual abuse, unlawful confinement, possession of child exploitation material. Lou Raines, accessory to murder, obstruction of justice, child endangerment, and conspiracy. Mercer watched from the hallway as Lou was led away in cuffs, head down. A decade of cold cases had never delivered this kind of justice, but it didn't feel like a win. Not when the face on the wall, Ethan's fourth-grade photo, still looked back at her with that crooked little grin. November 3rd. FBI Victim Identification Center, Quantico. A federal forensics team analyzed the rest of the tapes. What they found confirmed Mercer's growing fear. Not all of the children were Ethan. There were others. Some clearly predated Ethan's disappearance. A girl with braces and a lisp, estimated age 10. A boy with a missing front tooth. None of them were ever identified. But one tape, volume 19, had a date. July 17th, 1981, a year before Ethan. In the background, a calendar from the Emblem break room. This was never about one child, Mercer realized. This was about supply, access, silence. She stared at the names compiled on a spreadsheet, a list of Emblem employees who had logged entries to restricted wing access, sub-level B. 10 names, 8 still living, and 1 recently convicted of unrelated charges in another county, already in prison. The deeper Mercer looked, the worse it got. The tapes weren't the end. They were the beginning. November 4th, 2024. Location, East Orange, New Jersey, home of Melanie Griggs. The knock came just after 3 p.m. Melanie Griggs stood in her kitchen, eyes fixed on the VHS tape in her trembling hands. It was still in its cardboard sleeve. Faded, unlabeled except for a small piece of masking tape with one word scribbled in red ink. Keep. The knock came again. Firm, purposeful. She opened the door to find a tall woman in a gray blazer and badge necklace. Detective Callie Mercer. Behind her stood a plainclothes officer and a tech with a sealed evidence bag. Mrs. Griggs? Mercer asked. Melanie nodded. We believe you may have information related to the Emblem textile investigation. May we come in? Melanie stepped aside, still clutching the tape like it might disappear. They sat in the living room. Afternoon light filtered through blinds. The carpet was old but clean. A single framed photo sat on the coffee table. Melanie, age 10, standing beside a dark-haired boy with round glasses. Ethan Raines, Mercer said, nodding toward the photo. We were friends, Melanie said quietly. 4th grade, room 3. A. You said on the phone he gave you something? Melanie held out the VHS tape, careful not to meet Mercer's eyes. He snuck it into my backpack the day before he vanished. Said it was a secret. I didn't find it until days later. My parents thought it was something taped off TV. I never watched it. I was scared. Why didn't you come forward? Mercer asked gently. Because I forgot about it, Melanie said. Or made myself forget. I packed it up when we moved. It sat in a drawer for decades. But when I saw Ethan's name in the news again, I remembered. Mercer took the tape carefully. We'll digitize it and treat it as critical evidence. Do you remember anything else Ethan said when he gave it to you? Melanie looked down. He said, if anything happened to him, I should give this to the police, and that it would prove he wasn't lying. 3 hours later, Newark PD Evidence Review Room. The tape hissed to life on the monitor. Mercer, Dana Lau, and O'Malley stood behind the monitor as the screen flashed blue, then black. A timestamp blinked in white. July 20th, 1982, 8:13 p.m. The image flickered into view. A narrow concrete room, dimly lit by a single bulb. The camera was stationary, probably set on a tripod. Ethan sat cross-legged on the mattress, clutching a stuffed bear. He wore pajamas, yellow, printed with cartoon rockets. He looked straight at the lens. "My name is Ethan Rains. I'm 9. I'm in the princess room again. Uncle Lou says I have to be good, but the man in the apron says it doesn't matter if I cry." He looked off camera, listened. "He says if I tell anyone my mom will get hurt, that I'll be burned up like the others." A noise, metal scraping, interrupted. Ethan flinched. "I don't think I'll get out. But if someone sees this, I didn't run away. I didn't lie." He raised the bear, pressing its face to his cheek. Then the screen cut to black. Mercer sat in stunned silence. "That's not just a victim statement," Dana whispered. "That's a child's final will." O'Malley nodded slowly. He knew he was going to die. "No," Mercer said, voice hard. "He thought he would. That's different." She stared at the paused image of Ethan on the screen. She zoomed in on the background. Something flickered, a reflection in the metal beam beside him. A figure, only partially visible, crouching near the door. She marked the timestamp and turned to Dana. "Get it cleaned up. We might have our clearest shot yet." Later that night, Mercer's apartment. Mercer couldn't sleep. The video looped in her mind. Ethan's small voice, his unblinking eyes, the desperation in his whisper. She poured herself a drink, then stopped. Instead, she opened a file on her laptop, Princess Room Survivors, Unknown IDs, and began writing. Case note: if the tapes go back to 1981 and Ethan was not the first, the question is no longer who did this, but how many watched. Theory: the Emblem furnace room was a containment chamber, but the tapes suggest conditioning, not just abuse. They filmed, repeated behaviors, altered reward structures. This was systematic. She closed the file, heart racing. This wasn't the work of 2 men. It was a network, and the tapes were currency. November 5th. FBI Field Office, Newark. An early morning briefing confirmed Mercer's worst fear. In analyzing the tapes seized from Clyde Braxley's cabin, the FBI uncovered something previously missed. Several tapes were marked with interstate postmarks. "Someone mailed them," the agent said. "Multiple cities: Chicago, Atlanta, Austin. Recipients unknown. P.O. boxes, shell identities." Mercer leaned forward. "So it was distribution." "Yes," the agent said. "This wasn't 2 men hiding a crime. This was material being moved." The room went quiet. "Which means," Mercer said slowly, "Ethan's case was just one file in a much larger cabinet." November 6th, 2024. Location: Newark Public Records Archive. Historical Media Division. The photo had been filed under Community Events, July 1982. It wasn't evidence, not originally. Just a yellowed 8x10 print of the Emblem Textile Company's annual employee picnic, held at a park by the Passaic River, 3 weeks before Ethan Rains vanished. But when Dana Lau placed it on the scanner bed and zoomed in, her hands started to tremble. "Detective?" she called across the room. "You need to see this." Callie Mercer stepped in, coffee in hand. She looked at the photo. At first glance, it was unremarkable. Around 30 people gathered near a picnic table, posing with lukewarm smiles. Kids sat on laps. Husbands leaned on folding chairs. A balloon tied to a cooler twisted in the breeze. Then she saw him. Middle row, far left. Ethan, his bowl-cut hair, his oversized glasses. He wore a red t-shirt and had mustard smeared on his cheek. He was mid-bite, holding a paper plate with chips. He wasn't smiling. A hand rested on his shoulder. Large, male, firm. The man behind him wore dark coveralls, his face half obscured by a shadow, but his ID badge was visible on his chest, angled just right for the camera flash to catch a name. C. Braxley. But that wasn't what made Mercer's stomach flip. It was the boy next to Ethan, sitting on the edge of the picnic bench. Slouched, pale, wearing a striped shirt that looked too big for him. Mercer leaned in. "Do we know him?" she asked. Dana shook her head. "He's not in any of the emblem records. Doesn't appear in the employee family database. None of the kids at that event were registered with HR for food vouchers except Ethan and a few others. That boy wasn't one of them." Mercer studied the photo harder. The boy wasn't interacting with anyone. No one seemed to even be looking at him. It was as if he'd been inserted. "Could he be another victim?" she asked. Dana hesitated. "Possibly. I ran the face through missing children databases. Closest match is a boy from Pennsylvania, Liam Petrosky, age 10, went missing in 1981. Right age, similar features. Did he have any ties to New Jersey? None, but the picnic date was 16 months after his disappearance." Mercer leaned back, jaw tight. So either he was being hidden by Braxley, or this ring was transporting children across state lines. 3 hours later. Newark PD Photo Lab Mercer handed the photo to FBI liaison agent Chrissa DeLuca. "Enhance this corner," Mercer said. "The reflection in the truck window." DeLuca zoomed in. The company delivery truck sat parked behind the group. The passenger side window reflected a narrow slice of the field. In it, 2 men standing off to the side. One of them was Lou Raines. The other wore a tan blazer and held a video camera. That evening, Cold Case War Room Mercer updated the board. Ethan Raines, confirmed victim. Liam Petrosky, possible victim, disappeared from Allentown, Pennsylvania in 1981. Clyde Braxley, confirmed abuser, now in custody. Lou Raines, accessory, confessor. Unknown cameraman, present at event, never identified. O'Malley entered the room holding a folder. "You're gonna love this," he said grimly. "Guess what Braxley registered for in 1981? Mercer raised an eyebrow. "A post office box in Philadelphia. Used it for 6 months. Closed it 2 days after Ethan disappeared." He handed her a printout. "And get this. 2 other emblem employees had boxes at the same location. One was Lou. The other?" He flipped the page. "Edward Neely." Mercer frowned. "That name's not in any of the plant records." "It wouldn't be," O'Malley said, "because Edward Neely isn't real. He's an alias. DMV ran facial rec from the picnic photo reflection and matched it, partial, to a man arrested in 1986 for child exploitation in Delaware." Mercer flipped through the file. No conviction. Charges dropped due to chain of evidence failure. The man walked, disappeared. "But we now have a third face in the ring," she said. "And possibly a fourth, if that boy in the photo is Liam." Dana stepped in holding another piece of evidence. "Detective," she said quietly, "we just finished digitizing another bin. It's labeled PR Supplemental, 1982 Reels. It has names written on a paper insert. One of them is Ethan. The other?" She handed Mercer a name tag, stained but legible. "Liam P. Compliant. Closed July 82. Mercer stared at it. "Closed," she whispered. "Yeah," Dana said. "It's the same word used next to 5 other names. All children, all unconfirmed identities." Mercer swallowed. "It's not just child abuse. It's child disposal." November 7th. FBI Command Center. The team now suspected a coordinated trafficking ring operating out of Emblem Textile between 1980 and 1986, using the factory as a grooming and production site. The tapes, labeled with volume numbers and behavior notes, indicated structured programming, repeated phrasing, behavioral correction, conditioning. Cult-like behavior, the FBI psychologist said, but masked in working-class normalcy. It's why it went unnoticed for so long. A network, a system, a silent machine that operated under the cover of thread and steam and payroll sheets. Late night, Mercer's office. She stared at the reunion photo again. Her pen hovered above the boy's unknown face. Finally, she wrote beneath it, Liam Petrosky, probable victim, last seen alive, Emblem Company picnic. She underlined it once. Then she picked up a Post-it and added it to the corner of the board. What's buried beneath the other factories? November 8th, 2024. Location, Emblem Textile Plant. Structural Archive Survey. The factory hadn't been operational for nearly 4 decades, but its bones still groaned with secrets. Under a court order, Mercer returned to the site with a new team, FBI structural forensics, seismic scanners, and dogs trained to detect biological remains. Their mission wasn't to re-examine the furnace room. It was to look beneath it, beneath the reinforced flooring, beneath the second sub-level, marked nowhere on the blueprints, beneath the lies. By mid-morning, the cadaver dogs alerted near the southern boiler pit, an area previously dismissed due to flooding and structural rot. An hour later, they began drilling. What they uncovered was not a continuation of the furnace chamber. It was a hatch, industrial grade, latched from the inside, a sealed metal trap door. Mercer crouched near it, gloved fingers trailing over the faint serial plate riveted into the edge. Not original to the building, she said. This was retrofitted. The FBI lead nodded. Around 1981, judging by the rust layers and weld style, whoever installed it knew what they were doing and had a reason to bury it. 3 hours later, sub-basement. Chamber 2. The hatch opened into a vertical shaft with a bolted ladder. At the bottom, another chamber, and this one was different. There were no crayon drawings, no dress-up vanities, just concrete walls and a series of individual holding cells, each no larger than a closet. The smell hit first. Then the silence. 8 cells in total, 6 with mattresses. 2 empty except for shackles bolted into the walls, all of them sealed, padlocks rusted shut, chains strung outside the bars like cages. At the end of the corridor, a faded plaque was screwed into the wall. Property of Emblem Company, Dry Storage 6B. Someone had tried to make it look like inventory space, but no one stored children in rows. Forensics swept the room. Within an hour, bones were found in cell 3, child-sized, partial, some wrapped in cloth that had long since decayed, but a button remained, cartoon-themed, likely off a pair of pajamas. In cell 6, they found something else, a tin lunchbox rusted shut. Inside were crayon drawings. Names: Liam, Ethan, Marianne, Benny, Chris. Each sketch showed a stick figure inside a box, some smiling, some not. They weren't doodles, they were records. Mercer stood in the main corridor as the forensics team finished photographing everything. It wasn't a furnace room anymore. It was a mass grave with corners. She turned to the lead tech. Are these the only levels we've found? The woman hesitated. We found a conduit chute behind cell 4, blocked with cement, but it runs deeper, likely toward the drainage field. If they use that to dispose of remains, we may never know how many were here. Mercer nodded grimly. We dig anyway. Later that evening, Newark PD Cold Case HQ. Mercer sat alone in the war room, cross-referencing names, blueprints, witness statements. Then her eyes locked on one overlooked document. An invoice dated August 1981. It listed a construction payment from Emblem Company to an off-book contractor. The listed line item, excavation and sealing, internal storage modification /6B, no vent. The company paid $12,400 to a contractor named Harold "Red" Diekman. Mercer pulled the name. No criminal record. Died in 1996. But one note stood out. He was the father of Emblem's head of security during the early 80s. A family connection. A buried transaction. A sealed room built by someone who knew no one would ask questions. She stood, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. This wasn't just negligence. It was intentional architecture. Someone designed the hidden chamber for children, with access, with locks, with disposal systems, not a secret accident, a planned mechanism. November 9th, field forensics update at noon. Mercer received word from the dig site. Behind the cement-blocked conduit, teams found a vertical drop chute, at least 20 feet deep, lined with metal, now partially collapsed. At the bottom, more remains. Some human, some animal. Bones snapped, piled, discarded. DNA samples were taken, clothing fragments preserved, but most were too degraded for full recovery. One shirt tag remained readable. Property of Iranes, RM3A, Emblem Elam. Later that night, Mercer's apartment. She sat at her desk, the photos spread across the surface. There were too many victims now, too many names. Some without faces, some with photos but no recovered remains. She opened her case log and updated the entry. Total victims: 9 confirmed, 5 probable. Survivors: 0. Suspects: 4 charged, 1 unknown. But beneath it all, she typed a final line. There is no justice when the system was built for silence. Only exposure. Only the truth. Then she opened the Ethan Raines video one last time. If someone sees this, I didn't run away. He hadn't. They had taken him and designed a place to erase him. But now, the walls were talking back. November 10th, 2024. Location, Newark PD. Surveillance evidence room. They weren't just recordings. They were logs. Mercer sat across from Dana Lau, eyes locked on the monitor as digitized footage from the final bin labeled Admin External Archive rolled. No children, no pink room, no commands, just video. Hours of grainy footage, black and white, time-stamped, soundless. Angle, static and fixed, pointed at a hallway. The hallway inside the Emblem plant's security office. The door in frame opened every 20 minutes. Different men entered. All wore work uniforms. Most carried nothing, but several brought in tape boxes, others cash envelopes. One man, round-faced, balding, glasses, entered at least 12 times across a 4-month stretch. And every time, he dropped off a tape, opened a cabinet, and made a note in a spiral-bound logbook. Mercer leaned forward. Zoom in on that logbook. Get me a freeze. Dana paused, zoomed, cropped. In faint ink on a partially open page, PR/17, compliant PR/18, rejected PR/19, closed, and beside each, a number, amounts, hundreds, sometimes thousands. 2 hours later. Interview room 6. His name was Edgar Voss, age 73, now living in rural Maine. A retired plant supervisor, not on any initial suspect list, not in any personnel complaints. But he had one thing: access to the Emblem security vault. Mercer stared across the table at his pallid face, as still as the logbook now sealed in the evidence bag beside her. You were the drop point, she said. Voss didn't speak. You didn't make the tapes, you didn't take the children, but you facilitated it, you archived it, cataloged it, you took money in exchange for silence. He finally looked up. It wasn't supposed to be that, he croaked. It was just cleanup, surveillance. I thought it was over after 82. You kept watching for 4 more years. Mercer snapped. Your initials are on 36 reels. You graded them. Tears formed in the old man's eyes. They told me I was protecting the company, that it was blackmail footage, that it would never set light. You were the light, she said coldly. and you turned it off. November 11th. FBI Joint Task Force meeting with Voss in custody and now cooperating. The case widened. He confessed to storing master reels in off-site vaults. 4 locations, 2 already demolished. 1 now a public storage site. The last question, Mark A. condemned middle school in Camden. Abandoned since 1993. Used briefly by Emblem as a satellite packaging facility. Mercer felt her gut turn cold. "Why a school?" she asked aloud. The answer came from an analyst reviewing a payroll roster. 5 names on the Emblem list also appeared on the Camden School's temporary custodial contract. Same men, different uniforms. That evening, Mercer's apartment. She paced. There was no time to chase every site, every survivorless story. But one thing still haunted her. The name that appeared in Voss's logs over and over. B. Fisher, Final Review Authority. Who was B. Fisher? Mercer dug through old board meeting notes, Emblem archives, purchase orders. Dozens of documents bore his signature, sometimes full. Bernard M. Fisher. Listed as a corporate ethics advisor. Retired in 1987. Still alive. Age 92. Living in a private elder care facility outside Princeton under his full name. She called the FBI field team. "We have one more door to knock on." November 12th. Halebridge Assisted Living. The hallway smelled of lavender cleaner and antiseptic. Mercer and Agent DeLuca approached room 214 with a warrant and body cam footage rolling. A nurse opened the door. "He's lucid today, mostly, but he doesn't say much." Inside sat a gaunt man in a wheelchair. Thinning gray hair, liver spots, eyes still bright behind yellowed glasses. Mercer crouched down. "Mr. Fisher, we're here about Emblem, about what was built, what you signed off on." Fisher blinked slowly. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, "The room." Mercer held up the photo of Ethan. "The boy." Fisher's hand trembled. "We thought they were broken already. Easier that way." Mercer's blood ran ice. "You knew they were children." He looked at her with something almost like pity. "No one wanted to know. They paid for not knowing. That's what silence is. It's not an accident. It's a service." She rose slowly. He looked toward the window, voice distant. "We were never the watchers. We were just the curators. The real watchers, you'll never find them." November 13th, 2024. Location: Camden, New Jersey. Abandoned Halberton Middle School, former Emblem satellite site. It was the last address, the one tied to the quietest name. Halberton Middle School had been empty for 30 years, left to rot after a fire scorched the West Wing in 1993. Most locals thought it had been torn down, but the brick husk still stood, overgrown with ivy and shadowed by skeletal trees. FBI and local PD arrived before dawn. No press, no leaks. The warrant was sealed under Homeland trafficking protocols. Mercer rode with the second van, armed with a flashlight, gloves, and a hunch that what lay inside might close the loop or blow it open forever. The air inside was thick with mold and soot. Walls bowed from water damage, desks overturned, chalk still smudged across green boards. In the janitor's supply corridor, far beneath the gymnasium, they found a locked service elevator shaft welded shut. Behind it, a crawl space. And inside the crawl space, a vault. 1 hour later, inside the vault's steel shelves, dozens of them, all lined with waterproof tape cases, military storage bins, and labeled binders. Everything cataloged, numbered, cross-referenced. Mercer ran a gloved finger over one dusty spine. PR read, Vol. 01 to 50, Archived Master Cuts, Edu 82, Behavioral Response, Youth Files, MFin Private, Clearance, Admin Only. "What the hell is this?" one agent muttered. Mercer swallowed. "A curriculum," she said. Or a doctrine? She pulled one binder labeled Phase 3, Nonverbal Compliance Conditioning, Candidates Closed, 1981 to 1986. Inside were photographs, typed assessments, behavioral scores. Each page had a name, a birth date, a status. Ethan's was in there, so was Liam's. Next to each, final status, failed anxiety. Closed. At the far back of the vault, a red-labeled bin, a single reel sat inside, 16mm film. Not VHS, not tape. The label was handwritten, Final Reel, Curator Cut, 1986. Mercer gave the order. Back at HQ, they digitized it, played it. What they saw silenced the entire room. The final reel. A man stood at a podium in a dark room. His face never shown, always just off camera. Behind him, seated on the floor, children, 7 of them. Each in matching gray garments, hands folded in their laps. Boys and girls, ages 5 to 10. No sound. The man raised his hand. One by one, the children stood. Walked in a circle, stopped, sat again. Behind the footage, notes scrolled silently on black cards. Subjects exhibit total environmental compliance post-stage 3. No prompting, no vocalization, no resistance. We believe Phase 4 is possible, with increased funding and continued discretion. The screen cut to black. Then a final message burned into the last frame. This concludes the Project Princess Room series. All candidates archived or closed. Access restricted to final watchers only. November the 14th, 2024. Federal Press Conference. Sealed session. The emblem plant was declared an official crime scene and memorial site. Multiple arrests followed. Indictments issued. Federal investigations broadened into surrounding states. Missing children cases reopened. But the true origin, who funded it, who protected it, who watched the final reels, remained shrouded. Mercer refused to speak publicly. The tapes would not be made available. The victims' names, those confirmed, were added to a classified list. DNA work continued. Families contacted with care. The public narrative said, isolated abuse, localized corruption, justice finally served. But Mercer knew that was the lie they needed. Later that night, Mercer's apartment. She sat in the dark, the digitized frame of Ethan on her laptop, paused, eyes wide, lips parted like he was about to speak. I didn't run away. She reached out, touched the screen, and whispered, I know. December 12th, 2024. Location, undisclosed. A package arrived at a federal facility. No return address, no fingerprints. Inside, a flash drive. Contents, 3 new videos, all dated 1991, all bearing the same intro screen. Welcome, watcher. The final reel hadn't been the last. It had just been the end of Phase 1, and somewhere someone was still watching.